For a book club, I read Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, Between the World and Me, published just last year. Uh, the book takes the form of a letter from Coates to his son Samori. And at some point in the book, he mentions that kind of the reason he did this was that when Darren Wilson was not brought to trial for the killing of Michael Brown, Samori says, "I have to go," and retreats into his room and cries. And so Coates is really trying to share his own journey with his son, uh, and not to explain anything, but basically to give him a sense of the struggle uh, that Samori is going to have to engage in as a black man in America. Uh, on page 12, one of he I think comes as close to the thesis of the book as I can figure. He says, "I tell you now that the question of how one should live within a black body, within a country lost in the dream, is the question of my life. In the pursuit of this question, I have found, ultimately, answers itself." A little bit later on, he says, "In accepting both the chaos of history and the fact of my total end, I was freed to truly consider how I wish to live. Specifically, how do I wish to live free in this black body? It is a profound question because America understands itself as God's handiwork, but the black body is the clearest evidence that America is the work of men." The body is important for Coates because for him, it's all there is. He is not impressed by Black History Month, for instance, and one of the reasons is that he sees that during this time, everyone who is a hero is passive and victimized. And he repeats over and over again through the books that he was brought up not to accept any magical explanations, any dogmas, any religious fantasies. That this body is what you have, and that you can't claim a significance for later on outside of this body. You can't claim that the body may be lost, but the soul will be saved because this body is what there is. And so this is what drives him away from kind of what we tend to think of as the civil rights movement with King, um, and towards Malcolm X. But even then, see the reason that the question is important to him is that he's had to learn to live in fear. He says both in the streets and in the schools. Um, One of the key turning points for him is that he goes to Howard University, and at Howard he sees that there is no monolithic blackness, but rather there's the spectrum, and he sees that he calls Howard the Mecca, and he sees at the Mecca on the yard the full panoply of blackness. Um, and then in his studies, he also gets challenged. He says, you can't create like what he calls a trophy room of black firsts, or of kind of like a mythic blackness, um, and this drives back towards the body. Is that every one is one? There's no great stand-in for the whole race. Um, so from there, um, one of the real the next turning point for him is one of his classmates at Howard, Prince Jones, is killed by a police officer in Prince George's County, Virginia. And this is even more painful for him because that it's a black police officer in a county run by black politicians. And he says that he thinks about Prince Jones every day of his life. I think that uh, here again, he begins to see the importance of the body. And you already saw in that quote from page 12 how he contrasts that with the dream. And the dream, I think, is the idea that there, just as he's being forced to be specific and individualistic, the dream is kind of mythologized and unquestioning. Um, and Coates is driven to this kind of questioning all of his life. It's what drives him into journalism. Um, and so he learns to ask the questions and to see very specific um, individualistic instances in everything. And as a matter of fact, he as a matter of fact, for him, blackness is simply there's not a sense of race. Blackness exists as the people who are at kind of the bottom of the well of America, the people who have to be victimized so that the dream can go on. Um, and he drives that point home by never referring to white people, only that people who would be white. Because again, whiteness is not a biological necessity or even really a cultural creation. It is quite simply the way that the dream perpetuates itself. That somebody that somebody has to be the victimizer for the dream to take place. The book closes with two things that are important for him. One is that he goes with his son and with his son's mother to Paris, which he thought a long way from Baltimore. He thought that this might as well have been Jupiter, but he sees in Paris that because blacks weren't enslaved in Paris, that things could be different. That he says he still brought this fear from America with him. He kept waiting to be victimized and taken advantage of, but it wasn't there. And so he begins to see again that his horizons broaden. There are different possibilities, and yet he's from here. And so he always feels like he has to be on guard. And this is one of the messages that he sends to his son. He rejects this concept that you have to be twice as good as anybody else. He says, that's not valid. That his son should get to wear a hoodie. He should get to play loud music. He should get to be an American teenager and not have to be twice as good as the children of those who would be white. The second and conclusion kind of happens in the final pages of the book. You see that he goes and meets Prince Jones' mother and talks to her. And she was a woman who completely, she was a doctor. She was a woman who had come as close to the dream as any black person could. And yet still her son whom she had given ski vacations, her son that she had bought a Jeep for, her son was killed in that very Jeep by a police officer. And it kind of, I think, drives home for Coates that the dream is a fantasy, and that the only thing that there really is you have your body and questions. And the relentless questioning. The questioning will not allow you to believe in any myth or in any fantasy. Um, it is such a well-written book. Uh, I could not mark or underline in this book because that's meaningless when you are underlining everything. Um, it's a book of tremendous prose beauty, but not only that, it is a book that kind of lays open our assumptions, um, and I think drives us towards what is everything that exists in each one of us, beyond labels and beyond the myth. I would highly recommend it. Thanks.